Welcome to This Week in Brattleboro History,
produced by
the
Brattleboro Historical Society and
the Brattleboro Area Middle School.
The triangular piece of land wedged between Linden Street and Putney Road was once known as Toad Hill. On New Year's Eve, 1856, Larkin Mead and the Burnham brothers made the Recording Angel snow sculpture at the southern tip of Toad Hill. At the time, this section of the village was on the edge of the quiet, residential northern end of Main Street.
In 1890, the Wells drinking fountain was installed at the place where Mead's Recording Angel appeared more than 40 years earlier. William Rutherford Mead, Larkin's brother, designed the fountain for William Henry Wells. Wells had grown up in Brattleboro and gone on to become a successful New York City businessman. As a remembrance of his youth, Wells donated the fountain a year before he died, and the land for the fountain was given to the town by Edwin and Alice Carpenter. The Carpenters own a large house and property at the southern end of Toad Hill.
A July 1912 Vermont Phoenix article stated, "During the rain yesterday, thousands of toads, less than half an inch long, appeared in the north end of Main Street. This section has long been known as Toad Hill, and it surely lived up to its name." 20 years later, the southern end of Toad Hill was converted into a gas station. Originally, the drinking fountain had been a rest pit for horses who traveled along Main Street. But by the 1930s, the automobile had taken over horse carriages as the preferred means of travel.
The area around Toad Hill slowly transformed from a sleepy residential area of Victorian homes into a busy extension of Main Street. For example, another gas station was built on the corner of Walnut and Main Streets. The New Brooks Library replaced a substantial home, and a bank took the place of Larkin Mead's house.
In 1965, representative town meeting debated moving the fountain to the common. Some in town government were worried that turning traffic might cut the corner near the fountain and damage the 75-year-old granite structure. Despite these safety concerns, the article was defeated, and Louise Dunkley spoke for the majority in the Representative Assembly when she said the fountain should remain where it was. Mrs. Dunkley argued that it had become a town landmark, and she went on to explain how people used the fountain as a means of giving directions to travelers. She finished by sharing that if anything should be moved, it should be all of the road signs and the 20th century clutter that had grown up around the fountain.
A Reformer article written in the 1970s stated, quote, "The Wells Fountain seemed to crown the north end of Main Street for the 40-odd years that it was graced with a mansion and lawn in the background. Today, though structurally beautiful, it remains merely a granite aisle in a sea of pavement," unquote.
In 1982, Toad Hill was about to experience major changes. In April, the state signed an option to purchase an acre of land in the middle of Toad Hill. The property included the Kerr Funeral Home, an adjacent parking lot, and an 1850s Gothic-style house. Then, in August, the gas station at the bottom of Toad Hill was informed that Exxon was pulling out of Vermont and would no longer supply gasoline to the business. Talk of a fast food restaurant taking the place of the gas station began circulating in town.
At the time, Vermont District Court was on the second floor of the municipal building and had been looking for space to build a new courthouse for about a year. The state's first choice was the American Legion property on Linden Street, but the Legion did not want to sell.
Concurrently, community members became concerned about the threat of a fast food restaurant anchoring the southern edge of Toad Hill, and town manager Corwin Elwell spoke about an effort to raise local, state, and private funds to purchase the gas station. He said, "I think our feeling is that we would like to return it to a setting that would be appropriate to the Wells Fountain. For the next 6 years, Toad Hill would be altered to include the courthouse, green space, and a repositioned Wells Fountain."
In 1984, Historical Society officer John Carnahan wrote a letter to the editor of the Reformer. Quote, "The Brattleboro Historical Society has adopted the Wells Fountain as the symbol of its new logo. We believe Brattleboro is fortunate to have the fountain where it can be seen and appreciated by visitors as well as residents, and we support the efforts of the town to do whatever may be necessary to improve the setting and take advantage of this link to another era." Unquote.
Corwin Elwell, Leo Berman, Chris Hart, John Carnahan, Stephen Baker, Robert Amond, and Douglas Grube were among the many local residents who persevered for years to preserve the fountain and create a small park south of the newly built courthouse.
In 1987, the Reformer reported that Wells Fountain had been moved about 25 feet north of its original location in order to protect and preserve it for future generations. 2 years earlier, the town had signed a lease with the state, who had purchased the old gas station and land so that the town could create a green space between the courthouse and the southern tip of Toad Hill.
On July 8, 1988, the Wells Fountain Park was dedicated. Governor Madeline Kunin attended the ceremony and stated the park and newly refurbished Wells Fountain were fitting complements to the Gateway of Vermont. John Carnahan, chair of the Park Construction Committee, noted that local officials had raised more than $45,000 in donations from area businesses and residents in order to preserve the fountain and return the southern end of Toad Hill to a green space similar to what existed when the fountain was installed almost 100 years earlier.
We'd like to thank Maddie, Scarlett, Ava, Josiah, Elias, and Dakota for reading This Week in Brattleboro History.
Please join us next week for another story from our community's past.